Take a look at this picture. You'll notice the strangely carved egg sitting at the center of your screen. But what you're seeing right now was not meant for food. In fact, the insides have already been cleaned out. It's actually a reconstruction of one of the oldest water containers we know of today, called the ostrich egg canteen. Archaeologists believe that these canteens were first created by hunter-gatherer groups in southern Africa, nearly 60,000 years ago. This type of egg canteen is theorized to have been made by the ancestors of the San people located in the Kalahari Desert. It was passed down from generation to generation, and while most San today carry water in modern containers, you can still see ostrich egg canteens used in certain communities and cultural demonstrations. It's reasonable to say that for this community, and as such, for humanity as a whole, the greatest challenge has been survival itself. Not only do you have to find resources, but you must control them. How do you preserve food before it all spoils? How do you store what you've gathered for the long winter coming? And in what we'll be covering in this video, how do you keep water, arguably life's most vital resource, with you at all times, potentially hundreds if not thousands of miles from the source? Ostrich eggs are just one answer to this question. There have been hundreds if not thousands of similar tools that have all sorts of functionalities and outcomes, either beneficial or detrimental. We'll refer to these items more generally as portable water containers, ancestors or variants of the water bottles we're familiar with today. I want to clarify that I'm also aware that there is a distinction between bottles, cups, jugs, and canteens. We'll define water bottles as partially or fully sealed water containers used for hydration and convenient transportation by humans. Let's first circle back to the egg canteen. An ostrich egg roughly holds 1 liter to 1.5 liters of water and has a shell of 1.7 to 2.2 millimeters thick, many times thicker than chicken eggs, so it's strong enough to be carried around without cracking or leaking. This shell naturally contains many holes the size of microscopic pores meant for gas exchange during its incubation stage. To convert the egg into a canteen, you simply empty the contents through a small drilled hole, flush and scrape the inner membrane, then seal the hole and any open pores with wax, resin, or a tight plug to limit seepage and evaporation. San hunter-gatherers have long used beeswax and sticky plant resins to do this. We discover their traditions and abilities by uncovering fragments from the Diepkloof rock shelter. There, the archaeological dating shows a 60,000-year-old tradition of marking ostrich eggshell canteens with distinct visual codes, possibly for ownership rights, which could be among the earliest evidence of portable liquid storage and symbolic labeling combined into one singular tool. Eggs have also been used as liquid storage in other places and eras as well. In early dynastic Egypt, whole eggs were deliberately opened to make simple containers. A clean circular pouring aperture was cut to the side, sometimes just 2 to 3 centimeters across. A great example is in the British Museum's vessel EA 51157 from Faras, Nubia. This picture shows us an undecorated ostrich egg, explicitly used as a bottle with a neatly cut opening. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, otherwise known as the Met, also holds a pre-dynastic ostrich egg from Naqada II, a region dating back to 3450 and 3300 BCE, showing a very similar idea. A whole eggshell made as a water container and placed into a grave. By the Bronze and Iron Ages around the Mediterranean, elites of the time turned these eggs into showpiece bottles for luxury. Craftspeople engraved and painted the eggshells and then added mounts, mouthpieces, collars, foot rings, and handles made of ivory, faience, bronze, silver, or gold. Several famous sets come from the Isis tomb in Volci, Italy, like this piece with an ostrich egg lightly carved with lions, rams, and lotus bands. I want to make something clear. It's important to note that human history never advances in neat, linear steps. Most innovations we'll cover today were often invented at similar times, but they also changed and evolved as centuries passed. For the clarity of this video, I've organized the history by the approximate dates of origin, where we then deep dive into each until its most recent account. Anyways, back to the next bottle. While some groups in southern Africa were carving ostrich eggs into canteens, others in distant regions were creating entirely different tools. With regions containing abundant water sources and vegetation, using plants and animals as bottles were far more common. Among these, one plant in particular proved to be the best and one of the oldest we know of, used in various continents and cultures. The species, Lagenaria caesarea, more commonly known as the calabash. Using the calabash, they'd make the next bottle we'll discuss, called the bottle gourd. Archaeobotanical and genomic evidence show that the bottle gourd was not domesticated only once, but several times in completely different corners of the world. In Neolithic China's Yangtze Valley, at sites like Hemudu and Huahuqiao, around 7000 BCE, early rice farmers created their own gourds into lightweight bottles, creating a perfect solution for their humid wetlands, hydrating themselves as they worked on fields or walked long distances. All the way on the other side of the globe, in the Americas, Paleo-Indian foragers in Peru's Nanchak Valley were already cultivating gourds as early as 13,000 to 11,000 BCE. Fragments from the Huaca Prieta show interiors blackened by smoke, a treatment they use to harden shells and leave antimicrobial carbon inside, turning them into reliable sanitary bottles. In West Africa, historians speculate that gourds were made in a different way. Around 1500 BCE to 500 CE shows some bottle gourds, and many scholars suggest that they have been sealed with beeswax, which was a readily available material for them. Being light and portable, these bottle gourds could carry liters of water across savanna landscapes, steep coasts, and dense wetlands alike. So what made the bottle gourd so special in the first place? The secret of why it was so useful lies in the gourd's shell, otherwise known as the pericarp. It's made of cellulose and lignin, forming a rigid structure around 2 to 5 millimeters thick, durable in strength while remaining astonishingly light. The natural casing could hold between 1 to 3 liters of liquid. But the natural shell, though strong, was quite porous. To turn the gourd into a watertight vessel required additional processing and a bit of ingenuity. Some ancients, like the Nok, discovered that coating the interior with beeswax melted and sloshed around the interior, sealing the micropores and creating a hydrophobic barrier. Related lipid studies on the Nok ceramics have identified beeswax and hydrocarbon residues, evidence that waxes could have been used in their gourds. Other cultures devised different sealing techniques. Elsewhere, communities relied on tree resins. Heated to a viscous liquid and poured inside, the resin's acid seeped into the gourd's microscopic capillaries. As they cooled, they solidified into a glossy film that waterproofed the bottle. Among the Maya of Mesoamerica, around 500 to 900 CE, gourds were often lined with copal resin, the same resin burned in incense and rituals. Their gourds had a lining as effective as the other ones, but drawn from a different source, using their lush forests around them. Gourds spread widely and took on roles far beyond water bottles. In Africa, they became multi-purpose containers for milk, beer, and medicine, often decorated with carvings or pyro engravings to mark ownership or ritual use. In Asia, especially in China and Japan, gourds were dried and turned into elegant charms and even instruments like the hulu-si. In the Americas, they were adapted to ceremonial vessels and drinking cups, with Mesoamerican cultures shaping them into rattles and sacred offerings alongside their use as water containers. Across continents, the gourd also developed a deep cultural meaning. But before we go on to the next section, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to like and subscribe. It's completely free and it helps me out a ton in the algorithm. Anyways, back to the video. Where gourds could not grow, people started using animals, specifically their skin. They skinned a goat or sheep, stitched and sealed it, which would become their portable water supply, called the waterskin. We can watch this story unfold in fragments of evidence. In the eastern desert of Egypt, at the Roman granite quarries of Mons Cladanus, we have paperwork that details its usage. Notes called ostraca from Mons Cladanus in 107 CE record shipments of waterskins for garrisons. Duty rosters from 136 CE describe whole teams of men being assigned to nothing but hauling waterskins from storage to cruise in the blazing sun. Other instructions are like manuals for survival. Keep the skins oiled so they don't crack, store them in baskets, and never leave them under direct sunlight. In these dry and arid climates, leather could bend, seal, and endure, a perfect adaptation for civilizations in this way of life. North of there, in the Judean desert, we actually have physical evidence of the waterskin. Between 132 and 135 CE, during a period of distress in the Bar Kokhba revolt, people carried waterskins into limestone caves. 2 survived in the Cave of Letters, a prominent spot for refugees of the time. Now they're in the Israel Museum. You can see where they were torn and were mended, as well as where dark pitch was smeared hot to seal the pores. These are the oldest waterskins we physically possess. Since leather decays over time, the practices likely stretch back a millennia before the surviving skins we have today. Several descendants of the old waterskins also appeared, each adapted to their respective locations and habits. Around the Mediterranean, the leather bottle for wine became a delicacy called the wineskin. In Spain specifically, it's called the bota, and in the Basque Mountains, it's called the zahado. Generally, they are very similar products. The body is coated in hot pitch, and a horn nozzle and shoulder cord are added for ease of use. The narrow spout allows you to drink water by catching a stream without touching your mouth. In Basque culture, this is called drinking zarust, a practice derived from shepherd life. In northern India and Pakistan, urban water carriers called the bishti worked the streets for centuries, with their variant of the waterskin, the mushk, a large goatskin bag slung from a strap. Studio photographs from the early 1900s show bishti sprinkling gardens and roads, or offering sips to the public without contact, a public utility before pipes were widely used. Across the Arabian Peninsula, we have another waterskin, the al-kirba, used explicitly as a cooling bottle, as well as a carrier. The hide is first tanned, cleaned, stitched, and hung where the breeze can reach it. There, the slow breath of the leather pulls heat from the water inside. In museum collections from Sudan, the related kirba show the same structure as what we previously discussed. A broad body, tied limbs, and strap points, made for walking distance with the contents close to the body. All of these, wineskins, botas, zahados, mushks, and kirbas, work because they keep the collagen network stable and the insides hydrophobic. A chemical called tannins derived from bark and renins stiffens the animal skin against further decay. Stitches made with sinew prevent tearing at the seam. Hot pitch or wax fills the remaining holes or pores. What changes from place to place, however, is the use case. Wine demands taste neutrality, so Iberian makers perfected pitch films. Street delivery in South Asia selected for capacity and pore control, so mushks are big, simple, and easy to hoist and squeeze. Desert travel rewards evaporative cooling over long storage, so the kirba tan for strength and hang the skin where the air moves. Other parts of animals, including stomachs, bladders, intestines, and even horns, were also made into bottles. In the Arctic, where metal and ceramics were precious, seal stomachs, called pokes, were routinely made into water and oil containers. In this picture, we see an example of what they look like. The museum also notes that stomach and gut containers were also common household items well into the 20th century. Horns were also made into bottles. You might know that horns mostly served as cups, seen in Iron Age Europe through the Viking and medieval periods. But there's actually also a true horn flask. Craftsmen would often soften the horn in hot water or steam, split and press it into flat plates, then laminate those plates around a wooden core or mold to make a lidded bottle. Seams were often joined with pins or pegs, sealed with horn glue, resin, or pitch, and the neck was built with a wood or cork stopper. These show up in early modern Europe as pocket spirit flasks and shepherd's or hunter's bottles. Outside of using animal organs as a resource, people also used their surrounding landscape and turned it into bottles. In Egypt's New Kingdom around 1300 to 1200 BCE, craftsmen carved portable bottles from stone. Alabaster was a common choice. One famous piece at the Pottery Museum in London contains the cartouches, which are just carved tablets with inscriptions, of Ramesses II and Nefertari, once a king and royal wife of ancient Egypt. The cartouche showed prestige containers for extremely valuable liquids, oils, perfumes, and, in ritual contexts, water. While the bottles were durable and aesthetic, they were also quite heavy. A stone flask was primarily used as a bottle for short distances and important moments, less so for multi-day trips. Wood was also cultivated. In the early Middle Ages, there were some waterlogged caves where wood would be preserved. In 580 CE, at the Trossingen, on the Upper Danube, a wooden field bottle was buried with an elite warrior. Further analysis by researchers even found beer residues inside. In areas where bamboo was prevalent, people cultivated this resource into bottles, a practice likely thousands of years old, although since material decays, we have no good way of knowing. The earliest physical examples we know of are from 19th century museum pieces from Fiji in eastern Himalaya. Some are reinforced with plated cane sleeves and rattan strips to prevent splitting. Overall, even natural resources were used to create water bottles in all sorts of forms, and some forms are even used today. Clay. Clay redefined what a portable bottle could be. A skin was flexible and tough, but it flavored water and needed care. The stone was heavy and the wood needed to be carefully carved. Fired clay gave us a new way to approach bottles, something you could shape thin, give a narrow neck, and equip with straplings so it could hang from a cord, all by just using your hands. The largest form that spread was the flattened oval-shaped pilgrim flask. In the late Bronze Age, across the Levant and New Kingdom Egypt, potters quickly adapted and modified it. The general design is similar wherever you find it: the sleek, balanced body, the slim throat that limits slosh and spillage, and two small handles high on the shoulders for threading a strap. Some examples are even deliberately porous for lightness and sometimes cooling. Others were made in faience, a glassy Egyptian material that resists seepage and taste differences. By the first millennium BCE, the pilgrim flask had become one of the most found traveler items in the eastern Mediterranean world, where it was packed on journeys and slung on routes, left as grave goods with food and drink for the road. In medieval Europe, we see portable clay bottles as costrals, otherwise known as the traveler's canteen. You may notice some similarities to waterskins here, except this time there's a ceramic interior. Surviving London examples from the late 15th century are roughly a day's water for one person, around a liter or two. Further west in Iberia, like the waterskins, clay becomes a cooling agent by design. The botijo, a Spanish clay water pitcher, bleeds a tiny amount of water through its wall. Each gram that evaporates pulls heat from the insides, dropping its temperature. In the summer heat, this adaptation to make the temperature lower can be a massive plus. Now, clay was a great innovation, but perhaps what the opaque materials lacked, we've discussed, was style and elegance, something glass was able to solve. Before glass blowing emerged, glass in the Indian Mediterranean sphere was both rare and elaborate, made by labor-intensive methods like core forming and casting around clay molds, producing small luxury items such as beads and mineral imitations. By roughly 50 BCE, skilled craftsmen on the Syro-Palestinian coast pioneered glass blowing using blowpipes, enabling economical creation of hollow forms of glass, including early bottles, which revolutionized the availability of glassware. But as for glass bottles, the most significant invention came nearly 2 millennia later, when in 1871 Henry Ricketts of Bristol, England, patented the 3-piece mold. This mold was a significant advancement for glass bottles, allowing durable uniform bottle shapes for consistent neck and shoulder forms, ideal for reliable stoppers and efficient stacking. Soon, American manufacturers used such molds to make soda bottles, medicine containers, perfume bottles, and more. You've probably used this glass bottle sometime in your life, as it cemented itself in the modern zeitgeist. However, while glass could be shaped into almost any silhouette, it wasn't the bottle you trusted for long marches or rough handling. Previous examples were okay, but not durable enough. Guess where I'm going? That's right, metal. Long before armies, Rome gave these tough metal bottles to legionaries. The laguncula, a compact, handheld canteen in metal, could be found across the empire. One of the clearest examples comes from a sanctuary at Seino in Haut-Savoie, France, where we see an iron body with copper alloy fittings, a hinged carry handle, a squat neck, and a tethered cap, totaling up to roughly half a kilo. By the mid-19th century, mass-produced canteens, typically made of tinplate steel or pewter-clad iron with wool covers, were given to armies like those of the American Civil War. Factories stamped out tinplate bodies by the tens of thousands, slipped into wool covers. They were cheap, light, and easy to clean, perfect for stacking in depots and loading on wagons at high speed. Britain further standardized steel bottles by coating them with enamel, a hard, glass-like coating that stops rust. The early version was called Mark V, then Mark VI in 1903, and Mark VII just before World War II. Mark, denoted by MK, just means version. Each bottle was held in the belt and strap gear soldiers wore. A wool felt sleeve went over the bottle to add a little insulation and protect the enamel. In the United States, we saw the model 1910, an aluminum 1-quart bottle, about 0.95 liters, with a cloth cover lined in felt, a metal cup that fits around the base, and a hanger to clip it to the belt. That setup stayed practically the same between wars. In 1942, because aluminum was needed for airplanes, the same canteen silhouette was made in steel and porcelain enamel finishes instead. This was called the M1942. The big manufacturing breakthrough was something called impact extrusion. We won't get too deep into it in this video, but if you'd like a separate video on how they did it, comment down below. Essentially, you can think of it like pressing Play-Doh through a mold, but with metal. You start with a solid aluminum puck, hit it once in a shaped tool called a die, and it stretches into a seamless tube. Then you trim the top, squeeze the neck, and cut threads, or more specifically, the spiral grooves the cap screws onto. And out you get a standardized continuous way to make aluminum canteens. However, since plain aluminum can dent and also react with drinks, makers also add a clear coating so water doesn't touch the metal. Older aluminum bottles often use epoxy coatings. Some epoxies contain BPA, a plastic ingredient people try to avoid. So in the late 2000s, brands switched to BPA-free coatings. We'll get into this later when we go over plastics. You might have also heard of stainless steel, which avoids the controversial coating issue by skipping aluminum entirely. Most single-wall steel bottles use 18/8 stainless, about 18% chromium and 8% nickel. Stainless steel had numerous advantages. First, it's shaped well. You can press it into a deep cup-like forms. Welded clearly, you can join parts with heat and survive the dishwasher. In the early 2000s, stainless steel became the first widely available BPA-free alternative to plastic and coated aluminum. That's great and all, but we're missing the one innovation that got us here to where we are today. Metal water bottles today are now known for the fact that they can hold heat and cold for long periods of time. How they came up with this required another breakthrough. The thermos, aka the vacuum flask, was invented by James Dewar in 1892. These bottles were designed with two walls as a vacuum between them. With almost no air in that gap, heat can't easily move by touch or by passing moving air. A shiny inner surface also reflects heat, so drinks can stay cold or hot for hours. By 1904, Thermos was a brand, and you might have actually owned one or heard of it some time ago. Nevertheless, metal gave us a new way to approach water, to be able to keep it heated or cooled for extremely long periods of time without exerting extra energy or effort. The utilization of this resource has helped us go to further heights. But there's one modern material that truly separates itself from the rest, arguably throughout history. It's not found naturally, and it's actually produced chemically by changing petroleum oil. It's also one of the most readily manufactured, crossing over 600 billion bottles bought each year. That's right, it's plastic. Plastic changed everything about bottles, how they're made, how we use them, and even how we think of the water bottle as a whole. When you think of the water bottle, you are likely talking about Nathaniel Wyeth's patented invention in 1973, the polyethylene terephthalate bottle, or PET for short. PET had existed since the 1940s as polyester fiber, something your clothes might be made of. But turning polyester into a strong bottle with a hollow inside and hard exterior was simply not possible at the time and required another breakthrough. Wyeth's main innovation was realizing that a bottle could be formed in 2 stages. Instead of trying to blow a full bottle from a molten puddle of plastic, factories could first make a small, thick preform of plastic that looked like a test tube with a threaded neck. Once softened, it could be stretched and blown into a cold mold, like pulling a taffy and inflating a balloon at the same time. That stretching aligned the long polymer chains in 2 directions, dramatically increasing the bottle's toughness and gas-retaining properties. Just a few grams of PET would become enough to hold a liter of pressurized soda without bursting, while retaining its original taste. It was truly a genius piece of engineering, and once the process was industrialized, it was unstoppable. By the late 1970s and early 80s, PET bottles were replacing glass across the beverage industry. For soda giants like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, the switch to these plastics saved millions in shipping costs. For consumers, they were light, portable, and disposable, a perfect upgrade from the heavy and sometimes breakable glass. By the 1990s, bottled water brands like Evian, Aquafina, and Dasani helped normalize the idea of buying municipal water in repackaged, clear, crinkly PET bottles. The water bottle itself had become synonymous with the image of the PET bottle. Not every plastic bottle looked like the supermarket kind, though. In parallel, engineers experimented with different formats, since the cost and customizability were at an all-time high. The hydration bladder, for example, turned an entire backpack into a water container. With a soft synthetic bag, a horse, and a bite valve, hikers, runners, and soldiers could drink without stopping. Synthetic polymers allowed for designs that glass or metal could never do. Customized shapes, valves, and portability options that essentially redefined what a bottle could ever be. But there's another side to this story. Alongside PET's dominance in disposables, another plastic had gained popularity for reusables: polycarbonate. First developed in the 1950s, polycarbonate was strong and heat resistant. By the 1990s and early 2000s, it was the go-to material for durable sports bottles, labware, and most importantly, baby bottles. However, one of the largest controversies of recent bottle history arose. It was bisphenol A, or more commonly known as BPA. Under stress like boiling water, repeated dishwashing, or long soaks, tiny amounts of BPA could leak. Toxicologists debated how much actually mattered. BPA is known as an endocrine disruptor, able to mimic estrogen in the body. Some animal studies suggested developmental and reproductive risks. Others show no clear effects at those levels. Scientific agencies reached different conclusions, so it was inconclusive. The US Food and Drug Administration, for instance, stated that BPA was safe at typical exposure levels. Headlines in mainstream media, however, didn't wait for any conclusive or rigorous scientific evidence. In the mid-2000s, stories linking BPA to hormone disruption, cancer risk, or behavioral changes in children spread quickly, and stories that proved BPA never did were overlooked. As such, the public and the government demanded answers, and quickly. In 2007, Eastman Chemical came up with a timely solution. They introduced Triton, a BPA-free copolyester that promised the same clarity, toughness, and dishwasher safety as polycarbonate. In 2008, Nalgene, which you might have seen with these polycarbonate bottles, announced it would abandon polycarbonate entirely in favor of BPA-free plastics. Other brands followed suit. Governments soon added fuel to the fire. In 2008, Canada became the first country to ban BPA in baby bottles, citing the same reasoning we stated before. The European Union followed in 2011, and in 2012, the US FDA formally banned BPA in infant bottles and sippy cups. Technically, the US decision was made because manufacturers had already removed BPA voluntarily, not because they found any results. In fact, there is actually no definitive scientific proof proving that BPA causes much harm to the human body at those doses. Some Redditors even find that it might have been a deliberate marketing ploy for consumers to buy more bottles, since Triton bottles break much more easily than the polycarbonate bottles. Whatever the case, plastic bottles are now split into 2 main categories, and the side effects given by both are still being investigated. Despite the controversy, by the 2000s, PET bottles were everywhere: supermarkets, gyms, concerts, gas stations, you name it. It's estimated that the total production of these bottles globally soared past 100 billion bottles a year and kept climbing. Today, it's estimated at more than 600 billion annually, nearly 1 million bottles bought every single minute. Humans now have a portable and synthetic water container that doesn't even need to be saved, stored, or cared for. While that is the definition of controlling your environment, sometimes it can be taken too far. The fact that PET bottles were so cheap that they can be thrown out, as well as being resistant to breaking down, meant that bottles piled up in landfills and waterways all across the globe. In theory, PET can be recycled. However, in our world today, fewer than a third of bottles are collected worldwide, and only a fraction return as bottles again. Billions end up as litter, where they break down into smaller fragments and add into the growing tide of microplastics, now found from the deep ocean to the human bloodstream. It has consequences for the world's ecosystem and even our health that we may not even know of, since the technology is so new. Even though there's a ton of uncertainty in this area, and the reality looks pretty grim, scientists are devising a new solution for these PET bottles. Some are creating ways to make biodegradable plastics derived from corn or sugarcane that could compost and decay over time in the natural world. Others are developing enzymes and microbes that can break down PET back down to its chemical building blocks, allowing it to be recycled almost infinitely. There have also been governmental pushes like deposit return systems that have shown that collection rates can surge above 90% when bottles carry a small cash value. They're also pushing companies to create more sustainable solutions for our PET bottles, recycled PET bottles, closing the loop on the last part of the cycle. In less than a half of a century, the plastic bottle went from a breakthrough invention to one of the most produced and criticized objects on Earth. It solved the problem of safe portable water, but left behind a far bigger problem we're struggling and only just beginning to solve. In recent years, bottles have evolved past inanimate containers into lifestyle and even digital tools. Brands like the Hydro Flask, Swell, and Clean Canteen have turned reusable bottles as fashion statements. And smart bottles equipped with hydration sensors or UV sterilizers are able to deliver increased health benefits and additional convenience. This front is still ongoing, but it's exciting to see how computers and technology and inventions of very recent times are being incorporated into something as seemingly primal as drinking water. Overall, that's all the bottles we'll cover in today's video. I'm sure there are some I still didn't mention, so if you know of any others, drop them in the comments. If you watched this far, you'll love this other video of mine, where I talk about this ancient Roman cup that somehow changes color and puzzles scientists for decades. It's a really cool video,